Hey everyone, welcome back to another hardware news recap for the week, and this one we'll be talking about NZXT H1 safety issues. A direct quote from NZXT on that. Partners on supply and availability of GPUs from NVIDIA and AMD, talking about the AMD Instinct Accelerator. NVIDIA also has its own high-end data center or server-targeted GPUs to talk about. Microsoft and Silicon partners rolling out a special processor. And we'll also be going through some additional supply information, wafer supply for consoles, things of that nature. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Be Quiet PureBase 500DX. The PureBase 500DX is a new push from Be Quiet into mesh-fronted cases that are more thermally focused. The 500DX maintains high build quality and attention to detail for its dust filters, front panel installation, and fan placement, and still has additional focus on noise control. The case comes with three 140mm PureWanes 2 fans stock and has RGB LEDs, but with a physical hardware switch for easy control. Learn more about the Be Quiet PureBase 500DX at the link in the description below. So up first, a quick GN update. We do these every year where we have a bit of a charity drive at the end of the year around this time. So it is that time again, and we are partnering once again now for the second or third year in a row with the Eden Reforestation projects for a GN store special, but we're also doing a match of donations if you'd rather donate directly. So if you've been here a while, you've probably seen us talk about this group before, but Eden Reforestation Projects is a charity that we researched a while ago and chose because it employs impoverished people to reforest land that has been deforested. So this helps with, one, restoring habitat and reducing habitat loss in particular areas for wildlife. It also gives people jobs that are sustainable because there's additional maintenance and protection of the forested lands that they plant later on after all the trees have been planted. And they do work all around the world, so you'll see stuff as exotic as mangrove trees or as standard as pine trees in the list of things being planted. We like working with this group, and what we're doing for this one, just like the past few years, is for every item sold on the GN store on store.gamersnexus.net, we are going to work with Eden Reforestation Projects to plant 10 trees. So that's per item, not per order. So if you order multiple things in your order on the store, we will do 10 trees per item in that order. And this will be going on through December 18th. That means, for example, if you order 2 mouse mats, we'll work with them to plant 20 trees. If you do a mouse mat, a mod mat, and a shirt, we'll work with them on 30, and so forth. That includes all product sales, so even if you back order an item that's not in stock, like our large mod mats or our mouse mats, we'll still give to Eden Reforestation Projects. Now, just like the component reviews, as always, we only encourage actually buying stuff from us if you have a use for it. So if you're only buying to try and get us to pay for the planting of some trees, that is self-defeating in the purpose of it and is wasteful. Only buy from store.gamersnexus.net if you actually want to use something. Now, we do have some highly functional products on there, so we've got, again, the mouse mats, mouse pads, the mod mats for PC building, all that stuff. But if you already have it or you don't have a need for it, then instead what you can do is a direct donation if you'd like to Eden Reforestation Projects. We will link their site in the description below. And what we're going to do is a donation match up to $1,500 total from our viewers. So if our viewers collect $1,500 directly to Eden Reforestation Projects, then we will give $1,500 in addition to the 10 trees per item ordered on December 18th once it's all closed. Over the past couple of years, GN and its viewers have contributed to the planting of about 200,000 trees via Eden Reforestation Projects. If you're interested to learn more about the science side of it or the accountability, how they track the progress side of it, that is fairly well documented on the Eden Reforestation Projects blog and YouTube channel. And one of the things that we've always found interesting, so we spoke with them previously about a species diversity, basically being careful to not reforest a spot with only one type of tree because then a single disease can come in and wipe it all out, obviously. So they're good about taking a scientific approach to things and diversifying the species to what's native to the area, but without putting it at risk. So we like working with them because of their scientific approach to what they do, just like what our approaches to our own content. So again, while this is going on, feel free to either donate directly or pick up one of GN's critically acclaimed products. Our wireframe mouse mats are in super high demand, but we have a massive order arriving in the next couple of weeks, and they will be shipping out as soon as we get them. If you already have a back order in, then yours will ship in that time frame. These are desk-sized mousing surfaces replete with wireframe designs for coolers, SSDs, video cards, motherboards, and more, and also have a high-quality stitched blue border for long-term endurance alongside a custom blue rubber underside that was actually very difficult to source. You might also find our brand new Bar Runner bar mats interesting, which are in stock and shipping now. We've been impressed with all the home bar uses that our viewers have shown us via tweets, and of course there's also the long-standing large mod mat, anti-static work surface, or the numerous shirts, hoodies, and glassware on store.gamersnexus.net. And before moving on, while we're on the positive side of the news, a quick recap as well from the EVGA charity stream we did with Jay and EVGA. We recapped that in a separate video, so I won't be covering all that again, but the final numbers came in from EVGA for the contributions for their charities during that stream. We did one of these with them a year or two ago as well, and it was pretty fun, very successful for the charities they chose. So GN contributed just over $1,600 to EVGA's charity of choice, which was St. Jude, and part of that was through a 10% of GN store sales for that day was going to St. Jude Children's Hospital, and then we did a $1,000 match with viewers as well. EVGA says that in total it raised about $5,400, just over, via its own contributions, ours, and then the viewers of that stream, so thanks to everyone who participated in that. And they also noted that Husky Haven, which was Jay's charity of choice, it's a local dog shelter and husky rehabilitation and training center, as I understand anyway, that's near Jay, Jay's 2 cents, of course. So they got over $3,000 in contributions. Some of that was from EVGA for the second place money, and then, spoiler alert, sorry, and then the first place money went to mine of choice, which was Cat Angel, so EVGA did a $2,500 contribution towards them. I leveled it out and added $500 to the one going towards Husky Haven so that both of us could be winners. So a really fun stream that we've got to recap separately if you want to learn more about it. And thanks to everyone for making it a positive end of the year. But speaking of positivity, time to talk about safety issues. That's fun and positive. NZXT posted a thread on its subreddit entitled H1 Safety Issue, and it reads as follows, quote, NZXT has identified a potential safety issue with H1 cases, and we are currently working with U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, along with the proper global authorities, to notify our customers and provide them with a solution. While we believe this issue only impacts a small percentage of cases, we are playing it safe and have paused sales on the H1 and are developing a simple-to-use repair kit that H1 owners can install themselves without having to ship their cases anywhere. If you're an owner of the H1 case, again, a reminder that although obviously the information is sort of painted by the NZXT brush, the company did note that it believes what was the exact phrasing, a small percentage of cases impacted, so you might not need to panic, and you probably shouldn't panic in general about this, but if you are worried about it, though, they have an email support line set up for h1support@nzxt.com to get assistance with the matter. We've launched a few of our own probes into this and expect to have more information soon. We've also reached out officially to an NZXT representative, and we are, at the time of filming, awaiting a response. But it is a weekend here in the US, so we might not get one until after this goes up. Initial research shows that the Amazon product page for the NZXT H1 was removed. Again, at the time of filming at least, it was no longer there. That made all associated user reviews inaccessible, and the Newegg page is still up. It has one review visible right now, and if that's anything to go on, that review indicates that the user had, quote, a fire start in association with the NZXT H1. This is where NZXT should have been much more transparent, probably, when it said there's a safety issue, because the only report we could find out there related to safety issues was this report, maybe one or two others, of either sparks from a short, potentially a short circuit in the PCIe riser, or literally the word fire appearing, which is going to cause people to panic. So anyway, a little bit more information there from NZXT probably would have been wise to reduce the amount of concern they will be facing if it is in fact not a catastrophic issue. So our assumption, based on looking at cached information, is that this has to do with the PCIe riser in the case and potentially a short somewhere. There was a retailer we've not heard of before called Central Computers, and Central Computers had a page that has since been pulled, but it's still archived in the Google cache. And the cache results read the following, quote, message from our NZXT rep. We do need to halt sales due to the fact that a top screw has caused one case screw on the case to spark and possibly catch fire. We do have a fix for this, but we would need to halt sales for this product until we are able to get you guys the screw per units that you have. If you have already purchased the unit and are experiencing this issue, please contact NZXT's customer service team. directly to get the screw and receive a tutorial on how to fix the issue. So at present, it sounds like NZXT is taking the appropriate steps to remedy the issue. Again, would have been probably better to reduce the ensuing concern they're going to get to share a little bit more information on what exactly the problem is. But it seems like NZXT doesn't want a whole lot of media attention and coverage around this, so that's not available out there. But we have reached out and asked for official word on it, and then if that fails, we do have we have some ways to get the information that we're working on as well that by the time this video goes up, we will have already executed. So NZXT won't be able to look out for it. So that's the news. If you have an H1, just email them. Our assumption is that this is related to the PCIe riser. If that's the case, then probably if you haven't had a short already or an issue already, then we would assume you would not, unless maybe you move the case around or you change things internally. But if it's sitting there untouched since being built 6-8 months ago and hasn't had an issue, then we would assume you probably won't. But since NZXT hasn't told anyone what the actual issue is officially, we can't say for certain. So just trying to kind of temper the potential for panic because the words safety issue and fire both appeared related to this. That said, if you are concerned about it, just turn it off and email NZXT support, unplug it if you want to be extra safe, and hopefully they'll tell you more than they told the public. But we'll find out more soon and follow up on it next week. Okay, partners on supply and availability. In an effort to continue to kill the positive mood set by the first story in our news video this week, we'll now talk about the difficulty for supply to meet demand in the GPU market. So we've heard from a few board partners over the past week regarding GPU availability leading into 2021. There's another story later in this video that will talk about this as well, but we'll keep this short. This is from direct conversations between GN and the partners that work with NVIDIA and AMD. And on the NVIDIA side first, partners were telling us that restocks look better in the last 2 weeks of December than before it, for at least the partners with whom we spoke. That does not necessarily mean it's true for everybody. Some people might get shipments in sooner. But one of the major partners is expecting more volume in the 3rd and 4th weeks of December than it is in the 1st and 2nd. So doesn't mean you'll be able to get one, but it might mean you have a better chance of getting one, at least from that partner when they restock. We asked around for why, and we were told it's a mix of impossibly high demand, which is what we've been hearing for a while now. It was a somewhat standard supply, but the problem is that NVIDIA is having trouble ramping up to catch the demand now that it's been a couple months at this point. On the AMD side, a major AMD partner warned us to be careful not to break any cards during our teardowns because they said they would have difficulty getting us a replacement before January. So that's kind of the news we have on that one. Either way, both NVIDIA and AMD are having trouble meeting demand. AMD in particular is dealing with additional challenges in that it is supplying the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X with 7nm process chips as well. So it's splitting its wafer supply between multiple product stacks. Very quickly here, a recap of the RX 6000 reviews as well. So in case you missed them, obviously they're on the channel and you should check them out. But if you want a quick recap, the RDNA 2 GPUs came out in the last about 2 weeks now, last week for the partner models. And we looked at the 6800 XT and the 6800 reference models from AMD on launch, as well as doing a teardown on the cards. We also completed coverage of AMD Smart Access Memory. Overall, Smart Access Memory's impact to performance is just recapping those reviews in case you missed them. Impact was anywhere from 0% to a couple percent. You could sometimes see 10%, for example, Hitman 2 with higher settings and 4K resolution. So Smart Access Memory definitely has some impact. It is not a globally applied uplift. In some cases, from our understanding in conversations with AMD and NVIDIA, it sounds like resizable BAR, PCIe BAR can be a negative impact, and so the drivers have to be tuned to either optimize out of the negatives or turn off the feature for that specific game. So that's why you don't see this getting applied in quite as sweeping of a stroke as you might otherwise. As for the performance comparisons in our reviews, we showed that in terms of rasterization performance, AMD has some of its most competitive GPUs in years. The 6800 non-XT is especially interesting as it almost universally outperforms the 3070 in rasterization. Its biggest downside, the $80 increase in price versus the MSRP, at least when comparing MSRP for both cards. Of course, that isn't necessarily the price you'll pay because of partners. The RX 6800 XT competes directly with the RTX 3080, and at resolutions such as 1080p and 1440p, it often leads in rasterization, or at least gets close, depending on the games. 4K tends to be more in favor of the 3080. When looking at ray tracing performance, however, AMD got thoroughly destroyed in all of the benchmarks we do. There are a lot of ray tracing titles that are starting to sort of creep out into the market, and we're still using a standard test suite that we developed at the beginning of this GPU review cycle. So, as always, we'd encourage you to check out multiple reviews so that you can get the full picture, because there's a lot of different things. The variables get very complex with ray tracing, where you have to consider DLSS. We did testing with it on and off, so that there's sort of a level playing field, and then there's playing field where NVIDIA's got a clear advantage in technology for the games where it's actually worth using, like Control. And then you also have considerations for, is the game fully path traced, or is it just some things? So when you're just doing ray traced shadows, for example, in Tomb Raider, we were seeing a much closer comparison between the two, because, well, between the two architectures, that is, because you're still doing mostly rasterization and that hybrid approach to rendering. So AMD can leverage that rasterization performance still. Whereas in Minecraft, where it's fully ray traced or path traced, NVIDIA has a substantial lead because of its technology advantage. That's your quick recap. Check out the reviews for more information on those, though, including all the numbers on them. Next up, AMD's Instinct MI100 accelerator in the news for the last week or two. So AMD also has a new GPU that is not for consumers. Rather, it is AMD's latest entry in its Instinct line for HPC accelerators. The Instinct MI100 is AMD's first GPU to use the CDNA architecture, which is the compute-focused counterpart to RDNA. The MI100 is a 7nm GPU that looks to succeed last gen's MI50. And according to AMD, it's the first GPU to exceed 10 teraflops in FP64 compute, or double precision. The MI100 features 120 CUs, or 7680 stream processors, 32 gigabytes of HBM2, 1.23 terabytes per second of memory bandwidth, a 300-watt TDP, and a PCIe 4.0 interface compatibility listed. The GPU also boasts support for AMD's second-gen Infinity Fabric. AMD also announced ROCm 4.0, which is its open-source developer platform for HPC and AI. ROCm 4.0 supports a new open-source compiler and optimizations for OpenMP 5.0, PyTorch, and TensorFlow. AMD announced that so far, OEM and ODM partners like Dell, Gigabyte, HPE, and Supermicro are all expected to have MI100-based systems out by the end of the year. Up next, Microsoft and its silicon partners rolling out the Pluton processor and following up from the now old vulnerabilities of Spectre and Meltdown, just to name a couple of the most infamous ones in the last few years. CPU makers, especially Intel, have had to focus on providing both firmware and hardware level mitigations, and that's often at the cost of aggregate performance. Still though, security researchers that we've covered in the past with those vulnerabilities and side channel attacks had called for changes in CPU design and overhauling the way chips are designed with a greater focus on security. So relating to that, interestingly, Microsoft seems to think that it has a solution of sorts: the Pluton security processor. Pluton isn't exactly new. In fact, it debuted back in 2013 inside Microsoft's Xbox One console. The chip acted as a hardware-level root of trust and helped prevent physical attacks, hacks, and prevented the console from running pirated games, as well as providing a path for recovery in the event of a software bug. The overall idea with Pluton is the same, except this time it will be built into chips from Intel, AMD, and Qualcomm. The updated Pluton processor was a collaboration between Microsoft and the aforementioned CPU makers. At a high level, the Pluton processor doesn't sound radically different from Apple's T2 chip, sans maybe locking down the device. Pluton will act in conjunction with the CPU's TPM, or Trusted Platform Module, and act as a shared root of trust at the CPU level. It's also aimed at securing the communication path between the CPU and TPM. David Weston, Microsoft's Director of Enterprise and OS Security, had this to say, quote, "The Pluton design removes the potential for that communication channel to be attacked by building security directly into the CPU. Windows PCs using the Pluton architecture will first emulate a TPM that works with the existing TPM specifications and APIs, which will allow customers to immediately benefit from enhanced security for Windows features that rely on TPMs like BitLocker and System Guard. Windows devices from Pluton will use the Pluton security processor to protect credentials, user identities, encryption keys, and personal data. None of this information can be removed from Pluton, even if an attacker has installed malware or has complete physical possession of the PC. The quote continues, "This is accomplished by storing sensitive data like encryption keys securely within the Pluton processor, which is isolated from the rest of the system, helping to ensure that emerging attack techniques like speculative execution cannot access key material." Pluton also provides the unique secure hardware cryptography key, or SHAC, technology that helps ensure keys are never exposed outside of the protected hardware, even to the Pluton firmware itself, providing an unprecedented level of security for Windows customers, end quote. Additionally, Microsoft and its silicon partners noted in the blog posts that they expect Pluton will act as a means to reduce the overall attack surface or potentially eliminate some types of attacks altogether. NVIDIA and the A100 80GB DGX solution up next. So not to be outdone by AMD with its Instinct progression, NVIDIA at the SC20 supercomputing show announced a pair of its next products aimed at HPC and AI, the A100 80GB and the DGX Station A100. NVIDIA's A100 is its flagship accelerator, and the primary addition here is the doubling of the frame buffer, up to, again, 80GB from the previous 40. NVIDIA changed out the memory chips that it's going to be using as well. It is moving to a newer 3.2 gigabit per second per pin HBM2E memory, and will offer, or high bandwidth memory, HBM, and will offer memory bandwidth of 2 terabytes per second. The A100 80GB will exist alongside the A100 40GB. They are not retiring the latter. Just in case you were really worried you wouldn't be able to get the A100 40GB for your upcoming gaming machine, don't do that. It won't work well. The aim for the A100 80GB is for customers who have dense workloads where local memory capacity could offer performance improvements. Now, as ever, the focal point for NVIDIA and its accelerator class cards is going to be on HGX and DGX platforms. The A100 80GB will come in a few different configurations for HGX customers, and NVIDIA is also offering the DGX 640GB and the DGX Station A100 to customers. The DGX Station A100 is interesting. It's a server class workstation that uses an AMD EPYC CPU and a refrigerant-based cooling system. No word on whether NVIDIA will offer the A100 80GB in a PCIe card, as it does with the A100 40GB. Up next, RTX 3000 series supply. This one is, instead of being from partners, it's from NVIDIA directly in earnings calls. NVIDIA's top brass fielded questions with a slew of the usual questions from investors, but also a couple that offered a vague glimpse into the constrained GPU supply for NVIDIA, or at least its constrained ability to meet the insane demand, depending on which way you look at it. But either way, there's too much of one, not enough of the other. So in talking about Ampere's successful ramp and launch, NVIDIA CFO Colette Kress said the following, quote, "While we had anticipated strong demand, it exceeded even our bullish expectations. Given industry-wide capacity constraints and long cycle times, it may take a few more months for product availability to catch up with demand," end quote. So there are 2 points here to address. First, Kress mentions cycle times. Cycle time is the time it takes to process a wafer from start to finish and is dependent on several factors: the size of the wafer, the layers, the process node, and the technology being used to process it or make it. Different fabs have different cycle times, some higher, some lower. Cycle time can be measured in a couple of ways, but generally speaking, fabs are 3 to 4 months out. This means that Samsung, the fab currently manufacturing the 30 series GPUs, can't exactly be agile in terms of supply and demand issues. That's where Kress's, quote, "a few more months" comment starts to stain, because given cycle times and insatiable demand, it will likely be into 2021 before supply stabilizes. We also don't expect AMD's situation to get any better before then. It's splitting its supply in multiple directions as well. Also significantly smaller of a company, especially on the GPU side of things. So that's the status for now. We spoke with some system integrators and OEM partners, as we always do for these types of stories, and it hasn't changed. It's been basically Black Friday volume since March this year, except every month. So how do you deal with that? The industry obviously hasn't figured it out yet, which is, again, largely thanks to, well, some of it is leaving the money printer on, and suddenly you have families where previously one kind of garbage desktop might have been enough, or they might not have even had one. We're talking outside of our viewer base, obviously. and now you might need a computer for someone to do their engineering job from home, or for the kids to do their schoolwork from home, or whatever the case may be. So not a surprise is what we're saying to hear that the supply is still not meeting demand. Intel could use machine learning and supercomputers for future manufacturing. At the SC20 supercomputing show, it seems that Intel and Argonne National Laboratories are intending to work together to accelerate the future of chip making at Intel, or manufacturing. As originally reported by Anantech's Dr. Ian Cuttress, Intel's Trish Damkroger and Professor Rick Stevens, Argonne National Laboratories Associate Lab Director, talked briefly about how Intel and Argonne's collaboration could evolve beyond the Aurora supercomputer that we've discussed here in the past. Stevens stated that Argonne was interested in using AI, machine learning, and simulation to help optimize and solve problems with the current state of silicon manufacturing. Stevens also mentioned that there would be some announcements coming in the next few months about how this may be done. Additionally, Cuttress has some thoughts and insight of his own to offer, so you can check out the links in our show notes document below. And finally, some news on the AMD wafer supply predictably getting eaten by consoles. This has been discussed a little bit, but we do have some numbers. Perhaps unsurprisingly, again, one of the many reasons AMD is facing its own difficulty to meet demand, especially in the DIY PC market, which is on the bottom of the tier of important markets. Consoles are feeding into this. So Microsoft and Sony have high volume production targets to meet, especially before end of year, trying to hit the holiday buying season. Both rushed their products out the door to meet Black Friday and Christmas season. That meant that the majority of AMD's 7nm wafer supply is currently, according to this report, going to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X consoles. And in news from Gongshan Shibao, or it's a Taiwanese news website, I think Commercial Times Taiwan maybe, AMD has reportedly allocated 120,000 of its 7nm wafers to console development. So this further compounds the issues of DIY availability. Keep in mind again that OEMs and SIs have their own targets that they need to hit, and console makers have targets they need to hit, and all of these are business level agreements. DIY is left to fight over the scraps. So that's why you're seeing limited availability or limited ability for you to get a CPU in the 5000 series, GPU in the RDNA 2 series, or in some cases a console, because those are also fighting over 7nm. Everyone's using 7nm right now. Logically, it's safe to assume that console demand will diminish a bit after holidays end, or at least those initial purchase orders may be chiseled out a bit. So we might be able to see some more supply available for PC component manufacturing after that. Whether or not that continues to fulfill OEM and SI, or more of it goes to DIY, obviously, we'll find out shortly. But one would assume it kind of fill both markets proportionally. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net, where each item you purchase will go towards a contribution to Eden Reforestation projects to plant 10 trees. Or you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.